Hello and welcome to this special edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Here's wishing you all a very happy Independence Day. On the occasion of India's 77th Independence Day today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave an assurance that India will be among the top 3 economies in the world in the next 5 years. Setting a target of 2047 to make India a developed nation, the Prime Minister said the next 5 years will be crucial to ensure that the country's aspirations are met by the time it celebrates 100 years of independence. The Prime Minister underlined how India's demographic strength coupled with its democracy and diversity can help power its development journey. He said the convergence of these 3 values can fulfill the country's dreams. Stressing how India helped out other countries during the COVID pandemic, the Prime Minister said India is the world's friend who does not think just about itself. After COVID, India advocated for a One Earth, One Health approach. Listen in.
और मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाता हूं, आने वाले 5 साल में मोदी का गारंटी है, देश पहले 3 वैश्विक इकोनॉमी में अपना जगह ले लेगा। ये पक्का जगह ले लेगा। आज जो 13.5 करोड़ गरीबी से बाहर आए हुए लोग हैं, वो एक प्रकार से मध्यम वर्ग की ताकत बन जाते हैं। जब गरीब की खरीद शक्ति बढ़ती है तो मध्यम वर्ग की व्यापार शक्ति बढ़ती है। जब गांव की खरीद शक्ति बढ़ती है तब कस्बे और शहर की आर्थिक व्यवस्था और तेज गति से दौड़ती है। और यही इंटरकनेक्टेड हमारा अर्थचक्र होता है। हम उसको बल लेकर के आगे चलना चाहते हैं। मेरे प्यारे परिवारजनों, शहर के अंदर जो कमजोर लोग रहते हैं, बिना घर को मुसीबत रहती है, मध्यम वर्ग के परिवार अपना खुद का घर का सपना देख रहे हैं, हम उसके लिए भी आने वाले कुछ सालों के लिए एक योजना लेकर के आ रहे हैं। और जिसमें ऐसे मेरे परिवारजन जो शहरों में अपना शहरों में रहते हैं, लेकिन किराए के मकान में रहते हैं, झुग्गी झोपड़ी में रहते हैं, चाल में रहते हैं, अनऑथराइज्ड कॉलोनीज में रहते हैं, ऐसे मेरे परिवारजन अगर अपना मकान बनाना चाहते हैं तो बैंक से जो लोन मिलेगा उसके ब्याज के अंदर राहत देकर के लाखों रुपयों की मदद करने का हमने निर्णय किया है। मेरे मध्यम वर्ग के परिवार को जब 2 लाख से 7 लाख इनकम टैक्स की सीमा बढ़ जाती है तो सबसे बड़ा लाभ सैलरी का को होता है, मेरे मध्यम वर्ग को होता है। इंटरनेट का डेटा बहुत महंगा था 2014 के पहले, आज दुनिया का सबसे सस्ता इंटरनेट का डेटा का खर्चा हो रहा है। हर परिवार के पैसे बच रहे हैं। मेरे प्यारे परिवारजनों, विश्व कोरोना के बाद अभी तक उभर नहीं पाया। युद्ध ने फिर एक नई मुसीबत पैदा की। आज दुनिया महंगाई के संकट से जूझ रही है। पूरी दुनिया की अर्थव्यवस्था को महंगाई ने दबोच के रखा है। हम भी दुनिया से जिन सामान की जरूरत होती है लाते हैं, तो हमें सामान तो इंपोर्ट करते हैं। हमारा दुर्भाग्य है कि हमें महंगाई भी इंपोर्ट करनी पड़ती है, क्योंकि पूरी दुनिया को महंगाई ने जकड़ के रखा है। लेकिन मेरे प्यारे परिवारजनों, भारत ने महंगाई को नियंत्रित रखने के लिए भरसक प्रयास किए। पिछले कालखंड की तुलना में हमें कुछ सफलता भी मिली है, लेकिन इतने से संतोष नहीं मान सकते। दुनिया से हमारी चीजें अच्छी है, इतने बात से हम सोच नहीं सकते। मुझे तो मेरे देशवासियों को महंगाई की बोझ कम से कम हो, इस दिशा में और भी कदम उठाने हैं और हम उस कदम को उठा के रहेंगे। मेरा प्रयास निरंतर जारी रहेगा। मैं लाल किले से आपके आशीर्वाद मांगने आया हूं, क्योंकि पिछले सालों मैंने देश को जो समझा है, देश की आवश्यकताओं को जो मैंने परखा है, और अनुभव के आधार पर मैं कह रहा हूं कि आज गंभीरतापूर्वक उन चीजों को हमें लेना होगा। आजादी के अमृत काल में 2047 में जब देश आजादी के 100 साल मनाएगा, उस समय दुनिया में भारत का तिरंगा झंडा विकसित भारत का तिरंगा झंडा होना चाहिए। रत्ती भर भी हमें रुकना नहीं है, पीछे नहीं हटना है। कोरोना के बाद एक नया विश्व ऑर्डर, एक नया ग्लोबल ऑर्डर, एक नया जियोपॉलिटिकल इक्वेशन, ये बहुत तेजी से आगे बढ़ रहा है। जियोपॉलिटिकल इक्वेशन की सारे व्याख्याएं बदल रही है, परिभाषाएं बदल रही है। और मेरे प्यारे परिवारजनों, आप गौरव करेंगे। बदलते हुए विश्व को शेप देने में आज मेरे 140 करोड़ देशवासियों, आपका सामर्थ्य नजर आ रहा है। आप निर्णायक मोड़ पर खड़े हैं। और कोरोना काल में भारत ने जिस प्रकार से देश को आगे बढ़ाया, दुनिया ने हमारे सामर्थ्य को देखा है। जब दुनिया की सप्लाई चेन तहस नहस हो गई थी, बड़ी बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्थाओं पर दबाव था, उस समय भी हमने कहा था हमें विश्व का विकास देखना है तो मानव केंद्रीय होना चाहिए, मानवीय संवेदनाओं से भरा हुआ होना चाहिए, और तब जाकर के समस्याओं का सही समाधान निकालेंगे। और कोविड ने हमें सिखाया है, यह हमें मजबूर किया है, लेकिन मानवीय संवेदनाओं को छोड़ करके हम विश्व का कल्याण नहीं कर सकते।
Now, as we mark India's 77th Independence Day on Global Lens today, let's take a step back and analyze India's foreign policy, the trajectory it has followed over the years, and how it is currently poised under Prime Minister Narendra Modi. One thing there is no doubt about is that India's global stature has only risen in recent times. From facing sanctions from the West following its nuclear tests and being reduced to the status of a pariah a couple of decades ago, to now being feted in world capitals, recognized for its contribution to global peace and development efforts, hailed as an emerging regional and global power, perceived as the leader of the global South, and widely respected for its vibrant and robust democracy. India has certainly come a long way. Testament to that, among other things, is the fact that India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi was recently the toast of the US Capitol as he visited the White House on a state visit. India and the United States signed an unprecedented and historic defense and technology transfer deal, which meant New Delhi entered an exclusive club. Soon after, the French president rolled out the red carpet for Prime Minister Modi in Paris and conferred on him the highest civilian and military French honor, the Grand Cross of the Legion of Honor. Many in the Arab world, from the UAE to Egypt, have hosted India's Prime Minister and reaffirmed their commitment to their ties with New Delhi. Even in the face of international pressure, especially from the Western capitals and media, India asserted its strategic autonomy on the Russia-Ukraine war, for instance, while repeatedly calling for peace and dialogue and also maintaining its long-standing relationship with Moscow. India continued to import Russian oil even after the West imposed sanctions on Moscow. And India, in fact, minced no words in calling out Western hypocrisy on this issue. Prime Minister Modi's words of advice to Russian President Vladimir Putin that this is not an era of war resonated globally and were echoed by many Western leaders. From non-alignment, India has moved to multi-alignment in an increasingly polarized world. Next month, India is set to host the most powerful world leaders at the G20 summit in New Delhi. Of course, plenty of challenges still remain. Even though New Delhi has taken a very tough stance on Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, including carrying out surgical strikes on terror launchpads in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and the Balakot airstrikes inside Pakistani airspace, terrorism continues to be a major threat to India's national security. China perhaps presents the single biggest challenge to India's foreign policy today. An unresolved border dispute, unending tensions along the line of actual control, a constant threat to our sovereignty, and Beijing's growing aggression, expansionism and hegemony are a constant thorn in India's side. Then there is the challenge of balancing its ties with the United States on the one hand and Russia on the other at a time when the Ukraine war is still raging. And India's quest for a seat at the high table, a permanent seat in the UN Security Council, remains unfulfilled. So just where does India's foreign policy stand today and where is it going? What have been its most noteworthy accomplishments and what are the most intractable challenges? Let's dissect this with our panel of experts. All right, joining me on this Independence Day special edition of Global Lens today is Ambassador Manju Seth, former diplomat. We also have with us Professor Rajan Kumar, foreign policy expert. And in a moment, we're also hoping to be joined by Ambassador Shashank, former Foreign Secretary of India. All right, a very happy Independence Day to my guests. Let me start with Ambassador Manju Seth. Ma'am, today we are taking a step back and looking at the big picture of India's foreign policy. As I pointed out at the start of the show, we have come a long way, but there are also challenges galore. Let's divide this discussion into two parts, the accomplishments and the challenges. So let's begin with the most noteworthy accomplishments. How significant do you think is the fact that increasingly Western capitals, as indeed the rest of the world, now looks at India as an emerging regional and global power? And like I said, perhaps the biggest testament to that is how the red carpet has been rolled out for Prime Minister Narendra Modi again and again in one Western capital after another. And it's not just the West. We've also seen it happen in the Arabic world. How do you perceive these recent developments and what do you think they tell us about the trajectory of India's foreign policy?
First of all, let me wish all of you a very happy Independence Day. And coming to your question, yes, India has come a long way from an era of non-alignment and to an era of multi-alignment and also strategic autonomy. Much more assertive in its views, in its stance on various issues, and balancing various aspects. And at all times keeping its interests paramount and at the top of the table. Yes, we saw how the US, France, in quick succession feted our Prime Minister, and it was for the Prime Minister and for the country, an honor for the country as well. And where they are understanding that India is an emerging, responsible and reliable emerging country, emerging power and partner. And I think that is an important message of, earlier the image of India used to be of India as a developing world, a developing third world country, which can be maybe, to be interacted with once in a while, otherwise to be ignored. Very often our views were not always given the due importance that we would have liked to see, but now that has changed because we don't hesitate to call, say, a spade and to point out, what is our interest, along with, of course, balancing our friends our partnerships with different countries. As you rightly mentioned, China, Russia, the US, our global partnerships have realigned, and one of our greatest achievements has been in successfully navigating the changing geopolitical environment and keeping India at the forefront. And it is very likely that in the next, and of course our economic heft has increased, so that is an important contributor to the overall strength of India. And of course, our foreign policy choices are also, I think I should say, a little more mature, little more, able to understand what is happening in the world and how we can make the best out of the current situation. And as you mentioned, yes, there are many challenges, and we need to negotiate and navigate those as well. But yes, keeping India's interests paramount at all times. Neha.
We'll certainly come to the bit about challenges a little later in this discussion. So very interesting. You say, yes, we have moved from non-alignment to multi-alignment. This is an era of strategic autonomy that India is asserting, and national interests being paramount. That is something that has been made abundantly clear by India, in recent times. Professor Rajan Kumar, let me come to you. As I mentioned, a little over 2 decades ago, we faced sanctions for carrying out our nuclear tests from Western capitals. We were globally isolated. We were treated as an international pariah. Today, India is actually in an exclusive club of a handful of countries that the United States has chosen to finally share sensitive defense technology with. The fact that our Prime Minister was recently on a historic state visit to the United States, and we heard the most powerful man in the world, the US President Joe Biden, saying the India-US relationship will be the defining relationship or partnership of the 21st century. Of course, we have our challenges, but do you believe that it would be fair to say that India has in many ways arrived on the global stage and its voice is heard, its voice matters today more than ever before? Not to, of course, mention the fact that just next month we are going to host the G20 summit right here in New Delhi.
Thank you, Ms. Neha Khanna, and happy Independence Day to all of you. I think, in my view, India has made a remarkable transformation. Among the post-colonial states, India is unique in the terms of the kind of political system stability that we have provided to a huge country for the last 77 years. And stability is one important factor, in my view, which shapes the perception of India to other countries. Number one. And the second most important, and as Prime Minister was mentioning in today's speech also, India is going to be the third largest economy in the world. It's fifth right now, and very soon it will be third without any doubt. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And Prime Minister was also mentioning about the very huge middle class that we have prepared. And what does that mean? That also means that we have reduced our poverty level to approximately, say, about 10%, from a huge 30-40% to 10%. So that is an important transformation that I see, and political stability amidst the turbulence, because the world is facing crisis. We face the COVID crisis, economic stagnation throughout the world, and after that we have seen the war. But India continued to grow despite all the turbulence. And as you know, any foreign policy responds to two things in a specific. One is the domestic requirement, and the second is the external global environment. So in terms of India's foreign policy response, India's diplomacy, we have responded really well during the COVID, and also India's economy is one of the fastest growing rising economy among the bigger economies. But these are the major transformations, but also let's not forget the digital transformation. And India is one of the leading digital part today, and that's exactly the reason that why you see such welcome that you are referring to, as President Biden is saying that United States is going to have a very long-term sustained relationship with India. So US is not doing any charity. US knows the importance of India because of its economy, and also because as a counterbalance to China, and also for the strategic stability in the South Asian region. So because of these reasons, there is a huge convergence of interest, but also as Ambassador Madam rightly pointed out, and that we have moved from some of the things that we pursued in the past, but also there is an element of continuity there. When we say we moved from non-alignment to multi-alignment, we also the strategic autonomy that we pursued during the during the Cold War period. That continues in a different form. Of course, the non-alignment was a kind of equidistance from the big powers who were trying to make India an alliance partner. And now we are saying that we'll engage with all the powers which matter to India. So we are having a very close military and strategic partnership with the United States, but at the same time we are also a member of the BRICS Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and we have good relations with a number of countries which are critical to the United States. So these are very important changes that we see, and of course India has arrived to the stage. India is the leading power today. The world's perception of India had changed, and it had changed finally because of the reasons that I referred to now just now. So India has arrived without any doubt, and all the countries in the world, they consider India to be the leading power and as a model. For instance, the US and European countries are not really taken as a model in the large number of global southern countries. China also has it because of its communist regime. It also has a different kind of problem, which may not be acceptable to many of countries in the global south. But India as a model of democracy and development with diversity.
Absolutely.
So these are the reasons why that India is very important, not only for the global north but also for the global south. And in the G20, you'll see that India is also the voice of the global south, and India is trying to bridge. Trying to work as a bridge between the north and the south. So that's the very important role that India has assigned to itself, and it has also been accepted by both the north and south. So these are the important achievements of India, in my view.
Absolutely correct. India is very strategically positioned as a bridge between the north and the south. The Prime Minister, in his address on the occasion of Independence Day today, talked about how India's democracy and diversity are its biggest assets, which will take India to the next level. And you're quite right. India has clearly positioned itself as the voice of the global south, a country that is increasingly respected around the world, especially because of its democracy. Okay, let me now introduce our third guest. At this point, we're also joined by Ambassador Shashank, former Foreign Secretary of India. Sir, welcome to this Independence Day special edition of Global Lens, and a very happy Independence Day to you.
Thank you very much indeed. My salute to all the wonderful people who have made the country very proud, keeping our border secure, our internal situation secure, and also taking us to a position where people are respecting us and taking us what we mean, we always perform.
Couldn't agree more with you, sir. Now, on this show today, we are looking at the trajectory of India's foreign policy, how far we've come, and how much more ground we need to cover. At the moment, we're looking at the major accomplishments of India's foreign policy. We're discussing, sir, how just 2.5 decades ago, we faced Western sanctions after carrying out our nuclear tests. We faced global isolation. We were treated as a pariah by the international community. Today, India is the toast of Western capitals, with one country after another rolling out the red carpet for India's Prime Minister. The US President calls the India-US relationship the defining partnership of the 21st century. We are on the eve of the G20 summit that's going to be hosted here in India's national capital. We have asserted our strategic autonomy. We've perhaps moved from non-alignment to multi-alignment, and we have made it clear to the world that our national interests are paramount, as was pointed out by Ambassador Manju Seth. In your view, sir, how far have we come as far as our foreign policy is concerned?
I agree with you with your summing up, absolutely based on discussions with our panelists. And I would say that, yes, there have been a few important stages. One being when we decided to have our own nuclear autonomy, and we were able to tell people that we have a new policy that is no first use policy, which has not been announced by other countries. So we did that. Secondly, we, at the time when COVID crisis came up, we were able to not only take care of our own people, we also contributed very effectively to similar treatment in other global south countries. and especially our neighboring countries and countries with Indian PIO populations. Finally, we have also seen that we were already a large economy, we had a large population, we were able to take care of their requirements, but now we have become an important partner in the global south and global north also. And therefore, what has happened is that while China may kept saying that Quad is like a nation NATO, but they know it jolly well that India is a very important partner of the global south. India is very much involved in relationships with on multilateral issues with China and Russia and others. So we are not moving away from our own UN commitments in the past. But what we have seen is that many of the countries, they were taking their own path, either singularly or plurilaterally. And therefore, we decided also that we must build up our relations with the countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and also with the global north, which is the latest dimension where Prime Minister has very effectively built up ties with the leaders of the north, but also with the various intelligent people of Indian origin who have been living in these countries and who have made the global north what it is right now. So therefore, there is a certain kind of appreciation, maybe envy, that India has something to contribute, but also India can be a source of great amount of knowledge power, new technology, innovations, and especially what we have done in the sphere of space research. Our Chandrayaan is likely to be having a touchdown on the moon very soon. And we have also announced some kind of a study called Aditya to study the solar layers. So I think there are some new initiatives which India has taken, which means that we have moved away even from the question of multi-alignment and the autonomy. We have moved to a stage where other people are looking at us as one of the poles, whether in Asia or in global south and in the world as a whole. Finally, taking advantage of the G20 chairmanship, we have been able to connect the huge population of India with the whole G20 process, the global processes, and we have been able to convince both the Indians that they have a role to play in the south, in the global affairs. Secondly, we have told the people of the world that India has a great amount of contribution, and our people, especially our women and girls from the rural areas, from the smaller towns and everywhere, they are all contributing to forming India what it is and what it is going to be.
Quite right, sir. In fact, it's interesting you bring up India's vaccine diplomacy, because just this morning in his Independence Day address to the nation, the Prime Minister talked about how at the peak of the COVID pandemic, India reached out to the rest of the world, and it was an effort that has been recognized globally, including by the World Health Organization, how we provided vaccines to so many countries. He also laid out some ambitious targets, saying in the next 5 years, India is going to be the third largest economy in the world. And by 2047, India will be a developed nation by the time we celebrate 100 years of our independence. Before I take this back to the rest of the panel, Ambassador Shashank, I want to ask you this. Professor Rajan Kumar said that, when the United States of America rolls out the red carpet for India's Prime Minister and says that this bilateral relationship is going to be the defining partnership of the 21st century, and finally agrees to share sensitive defense technology with us, they're not doing us a favor. This is no charity. They're doing this because they recognize what India brings to the table, the power that India possesses. It is the largest democracy in the world with robust institutions. It is a peace-loving country that does not exhibit expansionism of the kind that China does. Many also see India as a countervailing force against an increasingly aggressive China. Is that an assessment that you would agree with, Professor Rajan, on?
Yes, I agree with him totally, that we have been contributing already very effectively to the international scientific and technological efforts, not at the border areas, but right in the heart of all these scientific efforts. So therefore, they know that India has been a very valuable partner all this time. Secondly, what they have found, that China, which at one time they thought were copying the Western technologies, maybe stealing the Western technologies, Now they find that China has taken a lead in almost 50% of the new technology innovations, and therefore they need something different. They have not been able to come up with their match to this new Chinese idea of dominance in 2049 and becoming number one power in the world. So they feel that India, which has so many innovations to its credit, which has also already contributed effectively to the whole world global efforts. So why don't we try that? And I think India has been making is a very important partner, and America has recognized that. So we have to see that yes, it is not a kind of a charity which they are doing to us, but they have appreciated and they have understood under the democratic framework that India has, and the Prime Minister Modi's decisive, very focused leadership. And I agree that what Prime Minister said, that look, we achieve in the time frame that we declare or even earlier of whatever new projects that we want to start. And I think this is something which other people have recognized, that here is a leader, here is a country. If they say something, then they achieve that. And I think that is very important. We have to recognize that. But India has a unique role to play. India is not going to become a camp follower only of the North. And North knows it. And that's why you saw some time ago, one of our good friends, Ashley Tallis, he in fact wrote that India might be a disappointment to many experts in the North, because India will not just take the role of Pakistan as it used to be, and then Pakistan made a fool of the West. Chinese have gone way beyond the Western countries' technological prowess. So I think India is going to be somewhere in a different league by itself. And if they have to recognize that, they have to appreciate that. And I'm quite sure that India would be quite willing to become a partner with them. But we have our strong partnership with the Global South. We can't jettison that. So non-alignment may have gone. Other kind of regional, inter-regional partnerships may have come with the Global South, with our old friends. But I'm quite sure that we will not jettison any of these, and we'll try to bring about world peace and equity with our efforts. And we hope that the Global North will recognize the merit of this partnership with India.
Absolutely. Not only is India not going to jettison its old partners of the Global South, the Prime Minister has actually gone so far as to say that the African Union should find a seat in the G20. Now, these are very significant moves that India has made, which are being recognized as, its leadership really on the global stage. Let me go back to Ambassador Manju Seth at this point. Ambassador Seth, this particular year is a very crucial year for India's foreign policy. We have displayed our strategic autonomy to the world. We have shown them that we have strong partnerships, but we are nobody's allies. As you mentioned, that our national interests are paramount. If we are going to be attacked for importing Russian oil, we're going to call out Western hypocrisy on that, as Dr. Jaishankar has done on multiple occasions. We recently hosted the SCO summit, and we are all set to host the all-important G20 summit. Of course, there is the challenge of balancing ties with the US and ties with Russia. But the question I want to put to you and the rest of the panel is this. As the G20 chair, India has a unique position, power and responsibility, as well as an opportunity. How do you think India needs to leverage this opportunity, being the G20 chair, and given that the most powerful world leaders are going to arrive in India's capital next month?
It is indeed an opportunity for India to leverage its position as the president, and it has done so. If you look at the agenda and you look at the diverse sort of objectives that we have laid down and diverse paths to that objective, I think, and across the country, we have, as Ambassador Shashank mentioned, it is something quite unique, and we have involved the people, and G20 is an opportunity for us to shape the global agenda right now on climate change, on development, on the multilateral financial institutions, and I'm confident that we will raise all these issues. And of course, women-led development is again a very important contributor to this whole agenda. And I think we are going to look at pushing this agenda because 50% at least of the world population is female. And I think they need to be on board. And that and in the global south especially, we need to ensure and encourage this and put it on a global agenda. And of course, as you mentioned, it's going to be difficult to manage the different and differing sort of points of view, and we may not bring out a completely successful document at the end of this. But we will be shaping the agenda. We will be looking at what is doable by the developed world, by the developing world, by the emerging countries, and to ensure that at the current world unrest or the conflicts all need to be addressed and need to be settled amicably. And I think India will try and again push an end to the Ukraine war, but both sides are yet to come to the negotiating table. But I think India will be able to push for world peace. The world is one family, and for sustainable development, renewable energy. I think all aspects we are going to focus on, and I think we will be able to set the agenda as we go forward.
Okay, and I want to ask this question to both Professor Rajan Kumar and Ambassador Shashank, starting with you, Professor Rajan Kumar. India has, as we all know, refused to denounce Russia for its role in the Ukraine war. It has insisted on maintaining its long-standing ties with the country, even at a time when Moscow is an international pariah. But at the same time, Prime Minister Modi's words of advice to Putin that this is not an era of war have resonated globally and been echoed by many world leaders. Now, there is concern that we may not have a joint statement at the end of the G20 summit next month, because this is what happened in Bali last year. While a reconciliation between the West and Russia seems virtually impossible at this point, and we don't even know if President Putin is going to attend the summit in person, but do you believe India can contribute towards somewhat narrowing the differences between the two sides, even as the Ukraine war is raging? What role do you think India can play at next month's G20 summit, apart from, of course, being the host?
In my view, the way the war is going in Ukraine and the kind of, very difficult positions that the two sides have taken, Russia and Ukraine both. Russia would like to retain the territory, and the West would like to push Russia out of the territory that it has occupied, including Crimea. And that's a very difficult proposition. So unless and until the two sides decide to compromise, I do not think that any negotiation would be possible, and neither the West nor Russia would accept any third-party negotiation at this stage of time. But India has taken a very balanced position, that where it has not criticized, of course it has not criticized or condemned Russia, but at the same time India has, as you rightly mentioned in the beginning of the program, that Prime Minister has said this is not the time of the war. So that is a very subtle and clear message to Russia that India is not in total support of the position that Russia has taken. And India has also said in a number of statements that all the countries should respect the territorial sovereignty of a country, which basically means that every country should respect including Russia, should respect the sovereignty of Ukraine. So India's position is that, and not why India's position. Most of the countries of the global south, say for instance Brazil, China, South Africa, and large number of countries in Africa, so they have started following this position because they know that the world is becoming multipolar, where United States and supported by the West is one power. China, Russia, if they come together, that can be another pole. But also let's remember that India is third pole, where there are a large number of countries which are not siding with any side. So that's a third pole. So India is emerging as a third pole, and that's very important position that we need to remember. But yes, in the G20, India will try to push for some kind of joint statement. But in my view, at the moment, the West is thinking that counteroffensive is going to succeed. Although in my view, counteroffensive is not succeeding, and it is leading to a lot of civilian casualty and now
no doubt.
The domain of this military expansion is now moving towards the civilian area in Moscow, in Kiev, and other places also, in Black Sea, etc. So, but what India can try to do, that if it can bring all the leaders together, as you rightly pointed out, it's not certain that President Putin will come, but if India can ensure that most of the important leaders come, And if they can come to some conclusion on three things: one, on war itself, but also on the supply chain disruption, whether it's energy price, because large number of countries in the global south, they're facing inflation and food crisis because of the war. So it's
Yes.
not just the Western country which are suffering.
And
A
that
large
is
number-
exactly the stand that India has taken time and again, that this isn't just about Russia and Ukraine. The rest of the world is paying a heavy price. The global south in particular has paid a heavy price for this war, whether it is rising inflation, energy prices, or the rest of it. So let me take this back to Ambassador Shashank. Sir, do you believe President Putin will attend the summit in person? That's $1 million question. Is it almost a given that there won't be a joint statement at the end of the G20 summit next month because of the differences between the West and Russia on the ongoing war in Ukraine? Let's face it, this war is not just between Russia and Ukraine. This war is practically between Russia and the West. Do you believe India can act as a bridge, even though this war has now gone on for more than a year and a half? How do you perceive India's role, sir, as the G20 chair with the summit now just around the corner?
India would very much like President Putin to attend this G20 summit in person, and we are still hopeful that it would take place. Right from the very beginning of the crisis, India has been talking about negotiated settlement and bring about peace in Europe. Europe has suffered during the First and Second World Wars greatly. India had contributed at that time greatly in the efforts to keep a balance in Europe to make sure that peace comes on terms for democratic and liberal values to flourish there. However, we are finding now that something different is going on. The initiatives are being taken. China has taken certain peace initiatives. South Africa has taken certain peace initiatives. Recently, Saudi Arabia. Now, is that only to win time before the West is able to further replenish the stocks of armament and other weaponry in the Ukrainian arsenal? Or is it for the reason that West does not mind if the global South is also co-opted in some way and it's brought on the side of the NATO countries, as it seems to be the position when they have been talking about some of these initiatives by Saudi Arabia or South Africa and other countries. What India has been saying that G20 is essentially an economic forum, and the economic and climate change issues should be the priority there. But we want peace to come in Europe, and if in case feeling has grown in among the people in Europe that yes, the leaders in Europe, that we have to move towards peace, then I think there is a possibility that even within this last 1 month, as we are moving towards a crisis situation in Ukraine, and more parts of Ukraine are getting lost to Russia, and even Poland and Lithuania, they are trying to further strengthen their borders with Belarus. So I think there are these new crisis kind of situations which are arising. We hope that it will not be a question of winning time to further replenish the armaments and to come up, use new war technologies. But we hope that this time there would be a feeling that gradually we should pull back and try to find how things can be reached, because this is a good point at G20 when Global South is worried about the grain supplies, where the peace is required by people in Europe. But somehow or the other, I feel that in America, which is the leader of NATO, there seems to be a domestic political rivalry which is going on. So they don't want, because of the elections next year, that any particular peace effort should be successful during this time. Otherwise, the party which comes out with this will be seen as a loser and will not be able to have a strong hand during the democratic elections in America next year.
In fact, President Biden seems to be going out of his way to appear tough on China, calling Xi Jinping a dictator, and just the other day saying China is in economic trouble. And when that's bad news, because when bad things happen, bad folks do bad stuff. But in this last segment, before we wrap up the discussion, I want to very briefly touch upon India's biggest foreign policy challenges. Ambassador Shashank, starting with you. You know, a permanent seat in the UN Security Council still remains elusive. Despite the tough stand that we've taken on Pakistan and terrorism continues to pose a major national security challenge to India, but perhaps it wouldn't be incorrect to say that it is China that today poses the biggest challenge to India's national security as well as its foreign policy. The unending border tensions, what's been happening along the line of actual control, and the growing Chinese aggression and hegemonic designs. What, according to you, sir, are the biggest challenges that India faces in the foreign policy domain, and how do you see things shaping up in the next, let's say, 5 years?
Well, if I quickly go through the process when we used to hide behind the solidarity of the non-aligned movement or the UN decision making, even to send out our UN troops abroad to make peace, we normally say that unless there is a UN resolution, we will not do it. We also willing to agree to the UN system where they said, okay, let us give the first seat to Taiwan from Asia, and then gradually we will see. In due course, we will try to accommodate India also. We went to the extent, I mean, which is very doubtful within the present kind of discussions which go on in India, that at one time the seat was offered instead of Taiwan to India, and India said no, the seat should go to China. And now we find that China is becoming our main rival in Asia and the world, and doesn't want India to come up. So I think this is a very important point for us, where we have to move away from simply seeking the permanent seat in the Security Council, because the UN processes have become totally outdated. And unless the countries which are permanent members of Security Council move in the direction of making it relevant, we don't have to take that burden on us. Secondly, China is becoming a challenge. They should know that India tried to help them very much in becoming an acceptable power in the world. And now they should not try to see that India is kept out as much as possible, and all try to tell India that, well, it is now a camp follower of the West, and a kind of bringing about NATO rivalry with the Asian countries in Asia. And so I think these are the kind of main challenges. The final thing I would say that India has a big race to achieve. We have to become number one in the economic world. Already in PPP terms, we are number 3 economy in the world.
Yes.
And there's no doubt at all that in the next 10 years, we would be in nominal terms also, we will be the 3rd largest economy. And the American think tanks have already started saying that by 2050, India will be number 2 power in the world. Of course, America would very much like India to become number 1 and to somehow supplant China. So that will be interesting to see whether our future generation will be able to achieve that or not.
Absolutely. Now, as this US-China rivalry plays out, and questions are often asked of India as to where it really stands in today's polarized world, Ambassador Seth, what do you think are India's biggest foreign policy challenges?
Of course, the number one challenge is China, but also our neighborhood. I think our neighborhood is being, we need a secure and a peaceful neighborhood. There itself, China's role, we can see, is becoming much more aggressive, assertive, and challenging India at every point. And of course, along the LAC, we still have major issues with China, where China is saying that it is the numero uno power and will not countenance India at all, at any place. Second thing which I feel is that, Africa is an important region, and we have good ties with them, but unfortunately, we have not been able to scale up our partnership, our DPA, our development partnership with them as quickly as we could have. And China has, its vast resources are there, and they have been very willing to, get our companies there to invest and to be present there and to do partnerships. But unfortunately, we have not been able to move that quickly. Whereas China has managed to, make its foothold or get a foothold in Africa, in much of Africa. And I think that is going to be another challenge for us as we go ahead. And as I mentioned, many of the other countries in Europe, while they are looking at India, but I think there is, and even in the US, there are some elements which look at India still as a kind of upstart nation, I think. They don't want to give India the due respect or acknowledge India's rise sometimes. This is what I feel, and how India has been a responsible power, and so far, and even in the nuclear field, everywhere we have been, behaving responsibly. While some nations, some countries have acknowledged it, there are some still who do not consider, India as being responsible. And I think, but of course, in the last few years, our credibility, our overall standing, and our overall heft has increased. But I think we need to even, not ignore those countries. And try and work out.
And clearly, we have a lot of ground to cover. There is no room for complacency. There is simply no room for complacency. Professor Kumar, I'll give you the last word very quickly. In your view, India's biggest foreign policy challenges, is China the most intractable one?
I think, I would like to, China has already been mentioned. So let me give a framework. There are three major challenges in my view. First is, of course, security, which includes China and Pakistan together, and terrorism emanating from there also included. But also, I would like to add two more challenges, which are very important from broader India's foreign policy perspective. One is economic challenge, because, even today, more than 1 trillion trade that we have export of roughly $450 billion, and import of more than $723 billion. I'm giving you the data of the last year. So there is a huge trade deficit that we need to cover, and we also need to enhance the trade. It's from 1 trillion trade today to maybe 2 or 3 trillion trade, like China. So economic trade is second aspect. Third is, of course, because we are rising economy, our aspirations are very high, so we need to integrate our economy with the global economy, and for that we need to integrate with Africa. But also one more challenge, which is very important, very quickly, is the institutional challenge, because as you rightly pointed out, that India is not the part of the decision making in most of the important institutions, or we do not have equal say, the kind of say that we should have. United Nations mentioned, but also IMF, World Bank, etc. So we need to push for institutional reforms. So these are the major challenges: security, economy, and institutional.
Very well summarized, and we certainly need to push for institutional reforms, perhaps starting with the United Nations Security Council. On that note, Ambassador Shashank, Ambassador Manju Seth, and Professor Kumar, it's been an absolute pleasure having the three of you on this special edition of Global Lens, and thank you so much for your time and perspective on India's foreign policy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all three of you. All right, and we're ending the show today with something truly special. On the occasion of India's Independence Day, three-time Grammy Award-winning Indian musician Ricky Cage posted a breathtaking instrumental rendition of India's national anthem, which he created in collaboration with a 100-member British Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. Releasing the 60-second video on Twitter, Cage said this was his gift to every Indian around the globe. This rendition was recorded by the world's largest symphony orchestra at London's legendary Abbey Road Studios. Ricky Cage says this is the largest orchestra ever to record India's national anthem, and it is spectacular. The Jaya Hey at the end gave me goosebumps. I felt great as an Indian composer. I'm sharing this historic recording with every one of you this Independence Day, he said. Take a look at this video and soak in its melody.
GPT. It can generate codes and human-like responses through text, write stories, and do a lot more.
I work in a newsroom with anchors, researchers and scriptwriters, graphic artists, producers, video editors, camera crew. But does a newsroom really need them today?
All of us have to think about unique and distinctive value addition that cannot be automated or repeated or replaced by a machine.
ChatGPT may kill many companies.
A human has to be in the loop with an ability to control this.